Courage Barbell. I'm your host, Chad Ikes. Today, we're going to talk something or about someone I've wanted to do a little series on for a while now, and I'm going to get to it. So this is going to be a 4-part series about the Wisdoms of Dave Tate. For those of you that don't know who Dave Tate is the owner, president, possibly CEO, I don't know what he calls himself, of EliteFTS.com. He is an accomplished 308 powerlifter who back in his day put out some incredible numbers, enough that I wanted to learn from him. Let's put it that way. Elite FTS is one of the leading businesses for strength equipment and anything you need for strength. They're one of the leaders in putting out information and knowledge about strength training for athletes to powerlifters to strongman. I actually write a column for them, which I've done for years and years and years, and I think I've written hundreds of articles for them. So you can check out my column there. They got a bunch of great guys. That's the only people I write for right now still is Elite FTS, just because of what they stand for, the quality they put out, and the quality of the people that are associated with Elite. So check them out for sure. I guess I should start with a little history about me. Basically, just played stuff in the neighborhood with friends until high school. Then I did football and shot put. I decided halfway through my senior year I was not a team kind of guy. I wanted to win really bad, and I wanted to do whatever it takes. And on a team, you're still susceptible to a lot of other people. So I quit halfway through my senior year, focused on throwing. I threw in college for a couple years, had to stop throwing because of chronic compartment syndrome, and surgery didn't work. I started lifting for football my freshman year. I continued to lift. I was still able to continue to lift after throwing, after I couldn't throw anymore, and just stayed lifting the whole time. I lifted many different ways using many different training methods. I just like to lift, and I just like to lift heavy. Got talked into doing my first powerlifting meet at the age of 27, 28, and benched 405 or 415 raw. Took second place. Had a blast. It felt so good to compete again. It was cool to be on stage lifting heavy weights. But I had to move back from Elko to Reno. Then I changed jobs, and a bunch of things happened. My training was all off. I finally did another 3-lift meet, a really small, like state games kind of thing, and I believe I bombed out of that competition. I did another 3-lift meet, totaled 1,700 pounds. And this was after like getting my jobs lined up and everything was kind of going pretty smooth. After doing that first meet, I went, I think I can be good at this. I loved this. It was a blast. It was fun. I think I can be good at this, and I want to pursue this. At that point, I really decided that I didn't know enough. I just did not have the knowledge. Even the prepping for that meet and the progress I'd made in those few months before the meet and the progress I was making after the meet, I knew that it wasn't where it should be. So, and keep in mind, once I made this decision, I actually quit the job that I had and went back. One of my bosses called me from my old job, and I made all these stipulations based around powerlifting in order for me to come back to that job. And I stayed there for 20 years, actually, because they kept their word with the things that revolved around my life in powerlifting. Like, these are the days I'm training. I can't work overtime these days. I'll always give you notice when a competition is coming up, but you cannot refuse time that I need for competitions. And so I was serious. I was very serious. And I started doing research. I read a lot of Louis' stuff. Conjugates seemed to make the most sense, although trying to understand Louis was difficult with the way he writes and maybe something with the way my brain works. I ended up coming on to Dave Tate, and this was like shortly after he started Elite FTS, so it was still very small. I think he was working out of an office in his house. But I looked at his numbers. I was looking at the stuff I could read that he was writing on a couple different sites. And I liked it all. It made sense. I liked the fact that he was a lifter. I liked the fact that he put up like great numbers. And I noticed he was coming to California to do a seminar. So I went, okay, this is the guy. Like, I made the decision. This is the guy. No matter what he says, I'm going to listen. And I'm going to do this. And we're going to see where we can take this. So I went to his first seminar in UC Davis. And I brought notepads, a couple pencils. He completely changed everything that I thought I knew about strength training. And keep in mind, I had been doing this since my freshman year. I've trained just about every way possible. But a lot of the beginnings was bodybuilding. And then when I got into college, my throwing coach actually trained us in weights too, and he was super knowledgeable. And so that changed a lot. I really learned about training for throwing and strength for throwing, but that was still different than powerlifting. And so at the seminar, I got my little notepad out and I'm writing stuff down, and he's going over the squat, and I'm like, just chatting, just writing all the stuff down. And to the point where I think I had a list of 40 things I needed to remember when to do a proper squat. And then Dave had us come up and went over our technique, and he ripped me to shit. I mean, changed every single thing I did. My squat was absolutely horrible. My bench was horrible. My deadlift was horrible. Like, I pretty much never gave much thought to technique at all. I trained basically strength all the time. And there was a good turnout. We had 40 or 50 people, I think, at that seminar. And then the next day, he said that he was going to come back and do a dynamic bench session, and we could come back and train with him. So I definitely came back that day, and I think there was maybe 6 people, something like that. And so we're going through our speed bench, and I'm gonna tell this one little quick story because I think it's kind of funny. We do our speed bench, and we go through it. And Dave's critiquing all of us as we go, and I'm watching him speed bench, and I've never seen anyone move a bar that fast. At that point, I was just in awe of how fast he could move the bar. And then afterwards, he's like, "All right, we're doing 225 for max reps." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm going last then." And Dave laughs at me, and he's like, "No, you're not. I'm going last." So anyway, I actually beat him on the 225 for reps, which part of my brain went, I just beat Dave Tate. And then I quickly realized that his max bench was way the hell over my max bench. So I was like, well, that's not really that big a deal then, is it? But it was kind of funny anyway. And when I tried to go last, Dave had none of that. But one of the big nuggets that I got from Dave, and I'm telling you this, so obviously I remember this. This still sticks in my head today. When we got done talking, and when we got done with the seminar, I was talking to him afterwards, and I don't know if he even remembers this or not, but we were talking about it, and I'm like, Dave, like I took all these notes, I wrote everything down, like I listened to everything you said, and my takeaway is that this is pretty simple. I'm like, I've been reading Louie's articles for like a year, and it's just, I read his articles and it confuses me. It seems so complicated. And I'm like, what you just explained to me is it's pretty simple. Like, it makes sense to me and it's simple. Did I miss something? Like, did I not understand some part of this? And I think he kind of chuckled in his Dave way. And he's like, no, that's it. He goes, Louie is sometimes very difficult to understand, but this is what it is. It really is this simple. And that kind of, I think I fell into the trap that a lot of people fall into. I had seen all this linear periodization, and I had read all these articles of these guys with these complex programs, and that kind of directed my thinking back to a principle my dad used to tell me about when I was a kid. Keep it simple, stupid. Like, I had this feeling that it needed to be complicated and that there was all this to it. And really it's not. It's strength training. It's pretty simple. When you overcomplicate it, you just mess everything up. You make it harder than it needs to be. So one of the first things, one of the little tidbits of wisdom I took from Dave Tate was, it doesn't need to be complicated to work great. In fact, the less complicated it is, probably the better it's going to work. And, there was a couple on a this is going to be like number 2. This part of number 1 and number 2 kind of rolled together. Another thing throughout this seminar was like when he started talking about accommodating resistance in bands. This was something that I had some experience with when I worked in physical therapy, and we would use bands and it kind of in an accommodating resistance fashion after surgeries to strengthen the muscle with the least amount of stress on the joint and the easiest part of the movement to give it more tension. And I had also, my background in throwing, we had always worked for speed and movement, and that's why we did some of the Olympic lifts, was to be able to generate force. And as I was training for like that first meet, I kept going, man, I feel like I'm slowing down, and like this doesn't make sense to me. It seems like I still need to be fast, because the faster I move the weight, the easier it is. But I would look around me and I didn't see anybody else doing that. And even when I was looking at Westside, I didn't really understand it the way the articles that I had read were. So part of number 1 is definitely keep it simple and don't complicate it. It doesn't, just because you think it needs to be complicated or because the rest of the people think it needs to be complicated, it doesn't need to be complicated. Just keep it simple. Like as you get better and as you learn more and as you'll be able to change things and tweak things, and there might be a little more complication to it, but still it's don't expect it to be hard and want it to be harder than it needs to be. All you're going to do is make it worse. So from that first seminar, I went back and I started training, and I kept everything pretty simple from that point. I focused a lot on technique. I stopped thinking that the training portion of it was this magical thing. And I started thinking more like technique seems like it's getting the right technique and understanding what muscle groups is more important than the training. And before that, all I really ever thought about was training. So this is basically my first epiphany that Dave Tate helped me see. This is the first little tidbit of wisdom I actually took from Dave Tate. And this was all just in the first seminar, which was a day and a half. One of the amazing things for me afterwards was that, I did get to talk to Dave afterwards, and he was really receptive to answering questions, and he was super helpful. And, he even said if I have any questions or anything, I can call him, which is pretty cool. I'm not really that kind of guy. Like, I don't really like bugging people, and I figured this is his job. This is how he makes his money. I don't want to just bother him. After I got back home from that seminar, like a week later, I got a card in the mail that he probably sends out to everyone that goes to the seminar. But, he remembered who I was, and he said, good luck training for 2100, which is kind of what I was looking at the time. Even though I was a long way away from that, that was definitely in my head. And he said, if you ever have any questions or problems, give me a call. And he put his number on there, which was very cool. And so I felt really good about my choice to start learning from him and to go to that seminar. So, lesson 1 that I learned from Dave Tate, maybe a lesson that I had already learned throughout. Like my dad always told me that when I was a kid, don't overcomplicate stuff. But it really hit home at this first seminar. And this basically is like, this was one of the first major tidbits of wisdom I took from Dave Tate. And still to this day, my clients, I'll tell them this story. I'll tell them, like, listen, just don't overcomplicate this. And when I make things simple for you, accept it. Be happy it's simple. Don't look for it to be harder than it is. We're not curing cancer. We're not sending people to the moon. This isn't rocket science. It's not brain surgery. It's strength training. And there is a lot to it. And there is some complicated stuff, but don't overcomplicate it. Like, approach it from the simplest point, and as you learn and learn more and keep seeking more knowledge, that's when you kind of start tweaking things, but you understand them at a slower rate, and you never get overwhelmed or overcomplicated by it. All right, guys, I'm going to take off. I'm going to let you guys go. Hopefully this kind of sinks in. Subscribe to the channel, like the channel, share the channel. And now you got to subscribe, because I got 3 more parts to this that you definitely want to see. This is not the only good tidbit I got from Dave Tate. So check it out, and I'll talk to you guys later. Out.